Well, the good news is it's not minus 30 something outside.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying the great weather in Ontario. We've been getting like some positive six. How are you guys in Alberta still doing? Are you guys still getting the freezy, the negative 40 type temperatures out
Oh,
there?
it's funny. It's funny, Noah. It was like 0 degrees yesterday, and it just felt so warm, like unbearably warm. And I was like, man, it's really short weather.
Unbearably warm. I've
And then
never
I
heard
was
someone
like,
say that.
man, I bet you these people from not Edmonton are probably like, this guy's crazy trying to wear shorts in 0 degrees. But I was ready to go to the beach, pretty much.
Yeah, I was up there for
Unbearably
the.
warm in
I was up there
zero.
for
That
the.
is crazy.
Can confirm. He's totally telling the truth, Noah. I was up in Edmonton for the budget, the Alberta budget. Income tax good, deficit bad. That's my quick take. But it was so warm, like I literally saw dudes in shorts and like flip flops, and it was like +6. So definitely a very Canadian moment. I'm glad. I think spring is eventually coming though, but I'll take it. All right, guys, let's get this thing started. All right, so lots to do on the show here. Welcome to Off the Record on True North. I'm Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm joined by two of my dear friends, Noah and Isaac. Guys, we've got so much to talk about here. Let's not ignore the big American elephant in the room. And that's, of course, what's happening with tariffs that are going on right now. Do you mind if I nerd out for a second and just explain tariffs? Okay.
Go ahead.
Please forgive me. I hang out way too much with Franco Terrazzano. Okay, so what's happening is the United States have imposed tariffs on Canadian goods. So stuff we send across the border to arrive on American store shelves from Canada will cost Americans more money. Okay? That is oversimplifying. I know that there is especially auto parts and stuff that go back and forth and it gets really crazy. But let's just say for argument's sake, that it's apples coming from the Okanagan into Washington State. Those would, if they were in season, those would have a Canadian tariff on them now on the shelf in American stores. Unfortunately, what we're now doing here in Canada is retaliatory tariffs. So this means that American stuff coming across the border that is on our shelves in Canada is going to cost Canadians more. So we have the data to back this up. I understand the emotion, okay? Somebody gets up in your grill, pushes you, punches you in the face, you want to punch them back. But in this case, with retaliatory tariffs as Canadians, this is like someone who's bigger than and stronger than you, challenging you to the fight, and you say, wait a minute. And you tie your own shoelaces together and then punch yourself in the face first. That's what we're doing, unfortunately, with these retaliatory tariffs. Guys, go ahead, take it away. Am I off base here? Am I overreacting?
No, not at all. I mean, tariffs at the end of the day is a policy that is going to increase inflation. It's going to lower your productivity, and overall, it's going to lower your GDP. And that is going to happen in Canada and the United States. You know, the tariffs aren't going to have necessarily an extraordinary effect on the American economy, but they're also imposing tariffs on China, and they're imposing tariffs on Mexico, and they're imposing tariffs on the EU. So that cumulative effect is going to have a quite substantial effect on the American economy. But here in Canada, we have to ensure that we do everything we can in our power to ensure that our productivity is not negatively affected, our inflation doesn't rise, and our GDP, has been going down on a per capita basis lately. But make sure it doesn't decline even further. And imposing counter tariffs are going to exacerbate that effect. And the United States seems to have imposed a policy whereby if you impose tariffs on them, they automatically increase tariffs. So that could increase the already 25% tariffs that the United States has imposed on us, and 10% on energy products. And so when these tariffs are just mounting and mounting, how are Canadian workers going to be able to feel secure that they're going to have a job in the next week, the next month, the next year? How are Canadians going to be able to go to the grocery store and be able to, buy some oranges from Florida, or be able to buy some wheat products that was potentially, taking some wheat from Canada and some oats from the States? It really does not help anyone on either side of the border, especially Canadians. And that's who the Canadian government really should be looking out for. And if they want to help Canadians, they should instead find ways to boost productivity and boost our capacity to withstand these tariffs by making our economy more competitive. and not actually less competitive.
Isaac, I know we were looking at some stats together before we hit record on the show. What's your thoughts on this when you're looking at some of these charts?
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me. Obviously, with that one study, Kris, we saw that the tariffs from the United States would increase our inflation by about 1.5%. But then with our counter tariffs, it would double to 3%. So, as your analogy alluded to, why are you self inflicting harm upon your citizens to retaliate to the United States? It makes no sense whatsoever. And I mean, there's so many questions that come to mind. Firstly, we've obviously focused on the Canadian response to these tariffs. I'm curious because obviously Trump is trying to alleviate the issues he feels are so problematic. That being the border and the fentanyl and the drug crisis over the borders. But I'm wondering, Kris, do you have any insights onto how Americans are reacting to these tariffs? Because as you said, this is going to increase the cost for Americans. So is Trump losing support in the States because of these tariffs, or what's the deal there?
That's a great question. So, just taking off my Taxpayers Federation hat off for a minute, I've been in the game for a bit, and I've talked to people from all walks of life, including people who are really mad. And I've had to de escalate them and get them talking about their feelings, and especially as a talk radio host. I don't think the Canadians went about this the right way for the most part. Trying to have an air war in the media where you're getting into kind of war of words and insulting each other and stuff, and trying to, Trump, pardon the term, trump up kind of Canadian patriotism, but on the surface level of like, we're going to take American booze off the shelf that we've already paid for, which doesn't really make sense. We're going to boo the American anthem, which at the time makes you feel viscerally good if that's the type of person you are, but doesn't look great on American TV. My assessment of this is that the smarter way to go about this, and this is exactly to your point, Isaac, is similar to the way that Premier Smith was trying. So get down there, put a smile on your face, here to help, want to make a deal, and really appeal to the governors of states where this is going to hit them the most, and show them with like math and graphs of, hey, your gasoline is going to cost you like 25 cents more per gallon, like today, because you're not getting it at the same discount from Alberta that you used to be because you're hitting it with a 10% tariff. Thank goodness it's not 25%. And to that point, I think that's why the Premier was able to get just the 10% tariff punishment from Trump instead of 25%, because she was down there doing the diplomacy thing. But politics gets in the way, right? So you see what's happening in Ottawa, and if you're just a cold, hard calculator and you're looking at political expediency, what's easier? Getting down there and actually doing I'm going to, how do I put this nicely, grin and bear it and get through some of these difficult conversations with somebody who wants to dominate my country and work out a deal, or just bloviate from Toronto or Ottawa about how bad things are, and then your politics will get a rise in the polls. So that's what we're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a great point that a lot of the politics of Canada right now are being dictated by emotion. It feels really good to, hit the Americans back with tariffs
100%.
when they impose tariffs against you. It feels really good to, espouse like venomous rhetoric against Donald Trump because, he is legitimately attacking our economy.
Yep.
And Canadians should, feel some level of, anger about it. But, the reasonable thing to do is to outline what your goals are and to achieve those through reasonable policies. If your goals are to mitigate the effect that this has for Canadians, that you should be deregulating your economy, you should be cutting taxes, you should be trying to make your economy as appealing for investors from, say, Europe, from Asia. from the United States, inside Canada, make those investors want to invest in Canadian businesses and in, Canadian entrepreneurs, so that you can actually grow out your economy and make Canada, great again. While while the Americans shoot themselves in the foot, and American tech entrepreneurs and American manufacturers look across the pond and say, wow, the Canadians have it great over there. But instead, they're looking across the pond and saying, hey, the tariffs aren't going to be great for us, but they're languishing in an overly regulated environment, and they're being taxed to high hell. So I think that we need to set our goals and move clearly toward them if we're going to actually get through these next 3.5 years.
Isaac, I'll let you jump in after a second, but I wanted to actually hear from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he's still Prime Minister, on what his actual response to the tariff imposition is. We have a clip of him. Here's what he said.
To my fellow Canadians, I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs. We will take measures to prevent predatory behavior that threatens Canadian companies because of the impacts of this trade war, leaving them open to takeovers. We will relentlessly fight to protect our economy. We will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day, because this country is worth fighting for.
Okay, so once again, that was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responding, I would say, pretty emotionally to what was happening with President Donald Trump imposing tariffs on Canadians. And again, I get it. There's going to be folks on this side of the border who are losing their jobs because of this nonsense. So this, pardon my language, sucks. And it shouldn't be happening. But the smart thing to do is to kind of take a moment, step back, and figure out how to fix it as best we can on this side of the border. I'll give you an example. Like back when he first won, and he was tweeting out, Canada's not a real country, blah, 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 blah. And then he said something a bit more than that. Like, my temper spiked. I'm like, hey, buddy, like, you get back on that side of the fence, man. Like, You're annoying me here. But that's not a smart mentality to take into a trade negotiation. So what we should do, I'll throw this to you, Isaac, is, okay, this is the situation we're in. Let's say on the surface that they do care about the border and that this is about fentanyl. Okay, let's do everything we possibly can to take that issue off the table, so it's no longer the issue. But what if the American economy and the way that they're handling their finances now does depend on long-term tariffs of other countries? That's a longer-term problem. So let's be smart, and exactly what Noah was getting at there. What I didn't hear, Isaac, from the Prime Minister the other day is we're going to drop all of our carbon taxes. We're going to stop our capital gains tax hike right now. We're going to, in fact, drop it lower. We're going to build a west to east pipeline, like right now. We're going to have LNG terminals on both coasts. Like, let's really train up for this. Like, have you heard any of those concrete things happening?
All right, Kris, so many things
Sorry.
I want to cover that have been discussed, but just starting with what Noah said about it feeling good, I just wanted to say quickly that it would only feel good if you're ruled by emotion, not logic, facts, and data, as we've discussed, because how could it feel good to essentially be doing more harm than good to yourself through these tariffs? And we've seen, for example, the anthem booing quickly. We've seen Canadians booing children singing the American anthem. I mean, it's sick. Who could feel good about that? This is sickening stuff. They're in no way are these people singing the anthem to blame for the tariffs or American people as a general populace either, right? So I really hated seeing that stuff at sports games. And let's moving to Trudeau's response now, calling President Trump Donald by his first name, and then dumb, not calling Trump dumb, but his tactics
idea
dumb.
was
I mean,
dumb.
this is not how you negotiate against the most powerful leader in the world. Certainly not. You, as you said, you have to find a deal. And bringing it back to emotion, we might think that based on Trudeau's response, he is being ruled by emotion, as so many politicians have been throughout this process. But you've discussed some of the things that should be being tabled, that being pro-energy policies and things that will appease Trump. We've seen Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, suggest that he might implement some of those things. What have you guys thought of his response to the tariffs?
My estimation, and I watched his speech, but I haven't read his backgrounder on it yet. Looks like Poilievre wants retaliatory tariffs, but not across the board. He said it was for items that we can easily make ourselves and or that we don't need. So, for example, I'm just guessing, maybe that means that he wouldn't put a tariff on, say, peanut butter imports, because we don't generally produce peanut butter on this side of the border. That's largely a southern thing in the southern states of the United States. Hard to say, because he's in a tough position right now where he's trying to show patriotism, where it is like, yeah, you get punched, you want to punch back, but you also have to be smart. So don't tie your own shoelaces together and don't punch yourselves in the face. I think he is smart to focus more on making ourselves as lean and mean as competitive as we possibly can. So this is like where a marathon's coming. You have to run it in 6 months. So what do? Do you eat potato chips and chain smoke for the next 5.5 months? Or do you actually start working on your diet and working on your cardiovascular system? That's what we should have been doing. And we should do it no better time than today. We should do it right now. And so my concern here is that we're going to have all of this pain inflicted both by the United States tariffs and our own tariffs. And we're not going to have the actual solutions that would help Canadians in this situation, which would be dropping all of our carbon taxes and building pipelines. Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really think it's important that Per Poilievre proposes a plan that Canadians feel is an appropriate response to the United States' imposition of tariffs, while also making sure that is reasonable policy. And I think in the lead up to January and the inauguration of Donald Trump, Pierre Poilievre has done a good job building out a message that has responded to the concerns of everyday Canadians and building out policy responses that are not to be partisan, because I'm not trying to be, but are quite reasonable. Axing the carbon tax when people are suffering from inflation is a common sense, reasonable policy. Trying to increase or make it easier for developers to build housing, and getting rid of development charges is reasonable policy. But when it comes to these tariffs, Canadians seem to want to punch back. They want to impose tariffs. So he has to find a balance between, imposing tariffs on things that are, say, inelastic goods, as, economic jargon goes. He has to probably try and impose tariffs on things that, can easily be substituted by goods from Canadians or from across the pond in Asia or in Europe. Perhaps a lot of services that American companies provide that can be provided, say, online, could be contracted from, companies in Canada or from, countries abroad. So there are a lot of ways you can sort of impose some pain in your own way on the Americans to help the American people come to the conclusion that these tariffs are bad, and to pressure the president to reverse course. That is part of the negotiation, and I think that Pierre Poilievre has to toe that line. I think he's been doing an okay job, but he ought not stray into dogmatism and into demagoguery with these tariffs, like Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau, and especially Jagmeet Singh has engaged in.
I just wanted to touch on two things there before we move on, Isaac, to Mark Carney. One, the inflation issue. We're hearing some pretty alarming language coming out from the last I saw, and I didn't hear his whole clip. The last I saw was from newly re-elected Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, basically saying that we'll just hand out government money. in response to this, and Trudeau saying very similar things. I'm having harsh flashbacks to the government lockdowns and what happened then, because even just take away all the social stuff and the fact that bank accounts were frozen and stuff, but just financially, that was a disaster, because the government turned on the printing press for money, just and then handed out, sprayed all of this inflationary cash everywhere, and we had the worst inflation in 40 years. So folks are wondering, holy cow, why is everything so bloody unaffordable and expensive? Ding, ding, ding. It's because of inflation, because of money printing and stupid government decisions, and the carbon taxes. And if we have two of the biggest political leaders in Canada, in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, both gonna just say, let's hand out government money, that would be a disaster. It is much smarter to get in there as hard as we can and get a deal so that this punishment stops. So don't do that. Second, again, I know that I mentioned the carbon tax a lot, but this is so important, okay? Look at it this way. We have a massive industrial carbon tax in Canada. It's already here, okay? It's in provinces. Mark Carney, who is probably going to be picked as our next prime minister this weekend, yes, he'll be prime minister, even if he's not a member of parliament. It's part of our Westminster system, okay? He loves carbon taxes. He is just going to take the consumer tax, which us unwashed masses can see and get mad about, which bothers him, and he's going to hide it in a massive national industrial carbon tax. What that means is two things. One, you're still going to pay it. You're still going to get screwed. You just don't know by whom, okay? So you won't be able to see the evidence or the receipts very easily. Two, on this issue of President Trump, picture him. Picture him in the Oval Office. He's on the phone. He's wheeling and dealing at his desk. He's calling up fertilizer plants and fuel refineries and manufacturers and steel manufacturers from all over the world. Hey, come back to the United States, make the Rust Belt Chrome Belt again, set up in Pennsylvania, set up in Michigan. And then he sees an announcement that Canada is imposing massive industrial carbon taxes on fertilizer plants, steel manufacturers, all of these industrialists. Guess what's going to happen? Trump will phone the moving truck company himself to have them go down there. So this is an example of why it is not smart for us to be strangling our own resource sector and hammering our own people with carbon taxes, especially while we have this threat to the South. Isaac, talk me down.
Yeah, no, just again, Kris, like last time, so many things I want to cover. But yeah, no, just firstly starting with what we were talking about with Ford and Trudeau and suggesting that they would print money. I mean, this is insane to me that any Canadian would be in favor of printing money after we saw the colossal failure that the pandemic policies of printing money were, not only for inflation, but for example, and for the small business loans. I mean, these were corrupt. We've seen reports saying that X percentage, I don't have the data off the top of my mind, but there were companies who weren't eligible getting paid millions, billions of dollars. I mean, how can we possibly advocate for this knowing this? And another thing I wanted to say, Kris, was so much talk of the tariffs, which of course, tariff is synonymous with tax. Why is the federal government then trying to act as if they're anti-tariff, but then on April 1st, they're going to be hiking the carbon tax, which from every poll we've seen recently, Canadians are vehemently against the carbon tax. So if you want to have an answer to counteract the tariffs, I mean, hiking or halting that 20% carbon tax, that's a 20% savings right there. I mean, that's going to be better than implementing counter tariffs that are actually hurting your own people, as we've seen through the inflationary data. So this is, I mean, yeah, getting through all that, do we want to hop into the leadership race now?
Yeah, let's move to Carney because I'll finish off with another carbon tax rant. I just know it just happens. I talk about it in my sleep. I'm sorry. But yeah, let's move on to Carney quickly here. Last I saw, it looks like he's going to win. It looks like Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, is going to be chosen as the Liberal Party leader. And I'm breaking it down like this because folks who don't live in this terrarium that all of us do, who are normal, that must be nice, don't follow all the minutiae of this. So when he is selected leader of the Liberal Party, he will become the de facto Prime Minister of Canada, even though he is not a member of Parliament. So he's not representing like Yellowknife or downtown Toronto or wherever, okay? And that is because the Prime Minister is a member of Cabinet, First Minister. They're the First Minister within the Cabinet to the Crown, King Charles III. So actually, to be part of Cabinet in Canada, under our parliamentary system, our Westminster system, because we are a constitutional monarchy, you don't have to be an MP. You can be in Cabinet without being a member of Parliament. It's rare, but it happens. So this is how Mark Carney, for a period of time, we don't know for how long, will be Prime Minister. At some point in the future, people are going to be expecting a federal election to happen, and he may or may not be elected by people. But as of right now, on Sunday, when they pick their leader, he will, if he's chosen, he will become the Prime Minister, which I think is important for us to focus on some of the stuff that he's been saying. Now, once you guys are finished with him, I did want to point out just how much he desperately loves carbon taxes, but I will get back to that. Noah, did you want to take this one away? You had a timeline that you had written out for Carney.
Yeah, so Mark Carney basically claimed that okay, so there was a story that broke that Brookfield Asset Management was moving its headquarters to New York, and Mark Carney claimed that he had nothing to do with it. He was completely fine with Canadians setting up shop in Canada and keeping their business there. So time passes, and it was revealed that Mark Carney, in his role as chairman of the board at Brookfield Asset Management, had actually written a letter recommending that Brookfield Asset Management move its headquarters from Canada to New York. So Mark Carney, when questioned on this issue, he basically said that, well, there's nothing that I could have done. This was a decision that was already in motion. Maybe I should have gotten better at politics, at concealing my true intentions. Like it was really weird stuff and really weird things to say. Admitting that he's not good enough at being a politician. Just flatly saying like, I'll get better at lying next time. Don't you worry, guys. I'll hide this. I'll hide my next scandal better. But really appealing to the members of the Liberal Party. How good is your prime minister at wiggling through scandals? But it really seems as if Mark Carney has been trying to walk back a lot of the things that he is committed to in his private life, like carbon taxes, like moving Canadian business to the United States, because he believes that setting up shop in the United States is the best thing for business, which, quite frankly, is not exactly wrong per se, but you're running to be the Prime Minister of Canada. You have to set a standard for yourself, and you have to actually like invest in Canada and commit to making Canada better. But Carney really seems to be having to walk back on his commitment on carbon taxes too. Carbon taxes were a big thing that Carney advocated for in his book Values, and just as in his role as an ambassador in the United Nations at COP26. And Carney, he has also had to walk back his claim that he has helped past prime ministers. He had to walk back the claim that in 2008, he basically managed Canada's the economic crisis and managed Canada's recovery. And he said that he helped Paul Martin balance the budget. Both claims were disputed by people who worked in both governments. So Mark Carney is really having a hard time adapting to being truthful and honest in front of media and Canadians. But the Liberals do seem poised to pick Mark Carney. Isaac, if you could just elaborate, what seems to be likely to happen on March 9th when the Liberals pick a new leader?
Yeah, just before getting into that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to True North's Cosmin Georgia, because obviously he has started an investigative series on the book Values, going into what Carney has said and what he's actually doing and what he says he believes now versus what he's said in the past. But yeah, no, hopping into the leadership electoral race, which of course concludes on Sunday, as you said, we've seen we've covered this extensively at True North, specifically in the past when the party disqualified Chandra Arya and Ruby Dalla separately for questionable reasons that on the candidates' in the candidates' opinion, but certainly we saw that happen when they were clearly picking up steam in the public's eye and looked like they could actually be real contenders for Mark Carney. Ruby Dalla perhaps came out with some of the strongest language against the party's decision, saying that they were essentially just doing whatever they could in their power to coronate Mark Carney and ensure that he became the leader. But another interesting thing I wanted to cover was the Liberals initially released that they had approximately 400,000 people sign up to vote in this leadership election. And then we've seen more recent numbers come up more around the 100,000, 200,000 mark. So people have been really critical of that because a percent or even less than a percent of Canada's population will be determining who becomes the next prime minister. I mean, it is really shocking when you look at it that way. Like 100,000 people could be determining who becomes the prime minister. This is nothing when in a general election, what we expect 20, 30 million. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it that way.
Yeah,
It's
the
pretty
fact that
heavy.
like 1% of the population, I think only like 2% of the Canadian population is just registered for political parties in general. So these parties have a lot of power, and they actually have a lot more power in the sense that only like less than 1% of Canadians are picking the prime minister in this liberal leadership race. In the United States, when they have a primary, they have substantially more Americans show out, and whoever wins the primary doesn't get immediately installed as president. They still have to win a presidential election. So not only are less Canadians having power to pick the liberal leader, the liberal leader is going to become the prime minister. So Canadians really, I think, are going to be concerned about the fact that, hey, I thought we're going to be thrown into election. This guy actually becomes prime minister, and they're going to want to hold him accountable in an election. See, what platform he's actually going to run on in a general when he's appealing to all Canadians. They're going to want to litigate some of his past work as Bank of Canada governor, Bank of England governor, his time at Brookfield, and on the boards of several, nonprofits and other organizations. They're going to want to get to know him because most Canadians still don't have a good impression of him, and I suspect that that's true because a lot of Quebecers say they're going to vote for him in opinion polls, but the guy doesn't know a lick of French, so I think when a general election campaign actually gets underway, and Canadians are tuning into the evening news almost every night to see what's happening in the election, they're going to get a interesting impression of Carney, and maybe some of that John Turner effect kicks in.
Just saying, I started on Parliament Hill in early 2001, before 9/11. I knew Paul Martin's staff pretty well. I knew Prime Minister Stephen Harper's staff pretty well. I knew Jim Flaherty's staff well. Mark Carney's name did not come up. Like, I'm just flat out saying, and I would say the same thing if he were running for Conservative Party leader and trying to claim that he was right there with Jim Flaherty, cheek to jowl. And I must say, it takes quite a bit, I find, for Stephen Harper to put his oar in nowadays. And he did.
Mhm.
He came out and he's like, okay, enough of this. Like, no. Like, yes, you were Governor of Bank of Canada. Yes, you're clearly a pretty smart dude. But don't just pass this off. And now maybe this was all happening in secret that we couldn't see. It was like at the super duper secret meeting that none of the staff were busy gabbing about. Spoiler alert, staff gab about everything. And this would have come up. And it didn't. So just saying, there were a lot of people there at the time who were observing what was going on. That wasn't a factor, just straight up.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, it takes a lot for Harper to comment nowadays. The
Mhm.
quote is, "Carney is, in all caps, not the day-to-day management of Canada's economy during the global financial crisis." And he basically says that he's actively taking away credit from Jim Flaherty, who's not around to defend himself. He
He's now
died in
passed, yeah.
2014, a few weeks after resigning as finance minister, and he isn't around to say, hey, hey, I actually did a lot of the work in the financial crisis. Thank you very much. It was actually the government that set fiscal policy. The Bank of Canada really just cut rates like most other central banks around the world. So his job wasn't exactly all that complicated, if we're being honest.
It's especially important just in interpersonal relationships to be really careful when someone has passed. So, for example, the late NDP leader Jack Layton was opposed to the carbon tax. And I say that because I remember talking to him about it with my face directly. And he also said so many times to other journalists, and it wound up in the Globe and Mail. Now, would I say he'd be against it today? No, that's not the right thing to do, because he might have changed his mind. So it's really, you got to be careful, especially when you're dealing with someone who is no longer with us. So that did certainly seem like a big misstep. Now, when it where were we with carbon? Oh yes, I have to point this out really quickly, because like this book, I know I harp on this book all the time. If I can beg and plead people, if you don't want to spend money on it, go find it at the library. Don't make Cosman do all the reading. Start a book club and read this thing. Because even just the stuff that he has in here on the carbon tax is essential for us to understand, because this person is going to be prime minister, at least for a period of time. And so I just wanted to quickly read one chunk here to show how important carbon taxes are to him. So carbon taxes are all through this book. It's essential. But so much so that he sees individuals, you, me, all of us listening, as personal carbon emissions budgets. Okay? Like walking, talking carbon emissions budgets. So I want to read from this book, page 233. To limit temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the average global citizen born today will have a personal carbon emissions budget over their lifetime equivalent to 1/8 of their grandparents. Okay? That means all of us that are living today will have to reduce our use of things like oil and gas, our carbon emissions budget, to 1/8 of our grandparents.
That is insane.
It's all through
insane.
this. It is all through this book. So this is not like one of those things where you're like, oh, I used to really like lasagna, but I'm on a no-carb diet now and I've seen the light. That's not the same thing. This is like a keystone to his worldview. And he also says repeatedly in here that over 80% of our oil and gas needs to be left in the ground. And he sees things like power plants as stranded assets. Folks, like, we have to really pay attention to what this guy is saying. And I really hope that he answers this question, this key question. Okay, you aren't going to scrap the carbon tax. You say you're going to change it. How much will it cost? It's not zero. So how much will it cost? Also, to end on tariffs real quick, we all are worried about tariffs, which are trade taxes, and we've explained. Carney wants to impose brand new, never before used carbon tariffs on imports into Canada. Yes. So any country that does not have a national carbon tax, that upsets him. And in order to punish that country, he wants to impose a carbon tariff on their stuff coming to us. This is not something he just said in this book. He said it with his face out loud at his announcement in Halifax, like a few weeks ago. So, sorry, just buckle up, folks. We're in for a hurricane here. Isaac, where did you want to end this? Do you guys want to end this on MP pay raises?
I think Noah has something to say.
Go ahead, Noah.
I just want to add that, like, he wrote a book called Values. It's either that, he wrote this book called Values and completely lied that, these are, values that are close to him, or, he is just saying, oh, I'm going to get rid of the carbon tax, to one audience, and then to another audience, you say, oh, no, I'm going to keep the carbon tax. And when he gets into power, he's just, going to govern by his values as stated in the book. So, either option is not good. It's either this man is a radical or he's dishonest. And I don't think we want a dishonest prime minister or a radical prime minister.
Well, Noah, we have seen that he will cater his message based on the audience he's speaking to greatly, considering he told French and English-speaking Canadians completely opposite stories, because when he was in Quebec, speaking of Francophones, he said, oh, we'll never have a pipeline through Quebec. I would never do that to you guys. But then speaking to English Canadians, he said, I'll be the most, well, I'll
He's
be
still
pro energy.
SB.
I'll put pipelines everywhere. Any province is up for grabs.
Yeah.
So how can you? These are days apart, by the way. How can you tell two different stories, completely opposite things, days apart? It's just to appease the audience.
Just a quick pro tip for Mr. Carney. Not all of us are perfectly bilingual, but most Canadians know jamais means never. Like, we know enough about that, okay? I've read enough cereal boxes. I've followed Tele Francais with the singing pineapple. Like, at least most of us know jamais means never, which is the word he used when he talked about never putting a pipeline through Quebec. So
how about je suis d'accord avec Hamas? How about that?
That was a bit of a misstep. It was interesting to see some of his colleagues on stage trying to help him and jump in there. Of like, I don't think you meant to say that. Just saying. All right, did we want to leave on a hilarious, because you either have to laugh or cry, so I'm choosing to laugh, note about the Member of Parliament pay raises? Okay.
Let's do it.
So, folks, I apologize in advance. This is going to make you want to barf. So, get your Pepto-Bismol ready. On April 1st, not only are we getting a huge carbon tax hike, which will make it more expensive for you to buy gasoline, diesel, natural gas, and propane. So, basically, it becomes a tax on everything because trucking, and we live in a cold country. So, that's going up April 1st. But there is a Member of Parliament pay raise that's happening too. Yeah. So on April 1st, your average backbencher, bench warmer Member of Parliament is getting about a $6,000 or $7,000 raise, around there. And the Prime Minister is getting around a $16,000 raise. After this raise is done on April 1st, a backbench MP, with no committee responsibilities, you're not a deputy whip leader, blah, 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 of your party, is going to make $211,000 per year, with a huge expense account, keep in mind. Okay, so like their food is paid for and their energy and their travel. The Prime Minister of Canada's salary is going to be $422,000 per year. Yes, he lives in a mansion and all of his stuff is paid for. I looked it up real quick. He's making more, last I checked, than the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Now, the Prime Minister of Australia, that is whack. He is like being paid way too much. But as far as the scale of prime ministers go, the Prime Minister of Canada is making coin. And that is happening on April 1st. Thoughts on this, gentlemen? Noah, I notice you still have a hole in your ceiling. So,
yeah, hopefully you could divert some of that prime ministerial salary to the roof. Help Canadians. We're looking out for Canadians. How about this Canadian right
we're going to give a give, send, go for Noah's roof.
But no, as I said, he makes a big song and dance about we're looking out for you. We've got your back, but he's really got his own back, and it's not like he doesn't lack for anything. This guy has a lot of money, so it's really hypocritical that he's giving his MPs and himself a massive raise. It's also interesting that not only is Justin Trudeau giving MPs a raise, Doug Ford is. For about a decade, Ontario has had an MPP pay freeze, so they've been getting they've been stuck around about $120,000, if I'm correct. I don't have the figure right in front of me, but it was around there. Yep. And Doug Ford says, hey, I won an election. I can't campaign on increasing MP pay, so let's wait till after election, and then boom, we're going to increase MPP pay. So it's a growing trend across the country. I know that in British Columbia, David Eby has no gripes with MLA pay increases. And, while our politicians continue to line their politics and get more and more, accumulate more wealth, we continue to struggle. It's interesting that the politicians are responsible for managing our economies, but their pay is in no way tied to the
performance,
the health of our economy. Exactly.
Yeah.
if you want this pay increase, let's see GDP growth at 4% per capita. You want that pay increase? Let's see the inflation at 1%.
Cut
you
government
guys
waste.
Don't deserve
yes.
that. If inflation goes up to above 2.5%, there's a pay should be docked, not. It should be docked 2.5%, not increasing.
Yeah,
so,
they used to have balanced budget legislation in British Columbia, where if a minister delivered a deficit in their department, they got a pay cut.
Yeah,
It was great.
That's how it should be. That's
Yep.
how it should be. But accountability is they're allergic to it. This is the real change they campaigned on. Lack of accountability. I love it. Let's move toward the side of Russia and less transparency instead of more accountability. That's great. That congratulations, Trudeau. That's
We
your
almost
legacy,
got through
buddy.
an entire show without mentioning Russia, but good job.
Damn it. I tried.
Isaac, I'll let you have your 2
Yeah.
cents here on their
Kris,
many 2
yeah.
cents.
Kris, I'm thinking you at the CTF maybe should start a petition to advocate for performance-based pay for parliamentarians. I mean, imagine how much we could improve our country if parliamentarians had to improve their pay scale. The similarities I'm drawing right now are, of course, to the CBC, who, despite their declining numbers, continue to give themselves raises. And we've covered this extensively at True North. It's like, nobody's watching our shows, nobody's listening to our podcasts, nobody's reading our articles. You know what? 25% increase across the board. Everyone gets paid more because, hey, it's taxpayer money. We can just do whatever we want with it. And of course, parliamentarians might be doing the same thing.
Perfect. Well, we do have a petition at taxpayer.com to stop the MP pay hikes. And I will put a call out to every member of parliament. There is a yawning chasm of opportunity right here that you can just step into. The late, great Ralph Klein once said something to the effect of, a really smart politician sees which way the parade is going and then jumps in front of that sucker. And that's what a member of parliament should do really quick. They should come out and say, I am fundamentally opposed to these pay increases. I will not take these pay increases if they are forced and there's nothing I can do about it. Dollar for dollar, nickel for nickel, I will make sure every one of my members of parliament in my party donates this money to charity. And then once I get in, I'm going to scale back our pay by this much. There is feel free. What I just said, I don't care about the credit. Steal it. Put it on a bumper sticker. Go for it. This is a huge opportunity to show that you're putting your money where your mouth is when you say, we're all in this together. All Canadians are really going to feel it. No, we're all in the same storm. Some of y'all are in a taxpayer-funded yacht, and the rest of us are in a dinghy. Some folks are unfortunately drowning. Okay? That's the situation we're actually in. So do not be disgusting and take a taxpayer-funded pay hike on April 1st. And I am actually super mad about this because guess what? Remember back during the lockdowns when people were losing their jobs, rampant depression, people were getting their wages cut. It was hell. Those members of parliament never missed one pay increase. Not one. Not one time. On April 1st, did they say, you know what? We're going to knock this off because this is pretty disgusting. This is very much let them eat cake. Nope. They don't seem to have that kind of situational awareness. So just saying, it would be really good for a political leader to come out and lead this fight and say, you know what? Even just for the symbolism of this, I am stopping this MP pay increase. So I'm going to leave with that fun note. Folks, fight back, okay? Head on over to the True North website, leave us a comment, send us an email, and do yourself a favor. Send an email to your member of parliament and your MPP, whatever your provincial representative is. Tell them that you're keeping an eye on what they're doing, what they're spending, and how they're voting, okay? That'll do two things. One, it'll keep them on their toes for next time when they come to knock for your vote. And two, it will give you a sense of agency and fellowship that you're not in this by yourself and that you're able to say something. Folks, I'll leave the last word to you. Isaac and Noah, if you want to sign off here.
Well, I just got to say that, holding your members of parliament, as Kris said, is to count is very important. They sometimes have public events. Go out to there. Sometimes they have town halls. And if your member of parliament doesn't do these sorts of things, reach out to them and say, why aren't you facing the music in public? It's really important that our member of parliaments stay engaged in their communities and they're reporting back the experiences of those communities to Ottawa and don't just become Ottawa-washed, as someone once told me.
That's a good term. Isaac, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add,
Sorry,
Kris,
did I
especially because
depress you?
I'm just I don't want you to get more angry. So
Oh, thank you. All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, until next time, everything we said here was off the record.